Can you go to the next slide, Andy? Toja and Teresa, you're first to introduce yourself. If you're talking, Toja, you're on mute, or you might be on mute.
Just practicing. Just kidding, everybody. I apologize. My name is Teresa Nord, and I am a TA specialist here at TYRC, and I'll pass it on to Ethleen.
I'm also with the Tribal Youth Resource Center. I am a technical assistance manager, and I am here with my wonderful relatives, and I hail from Porcupine, South Dakota. I'm Oglala Lakota. I'm also part Crow, and I live with my wonderful companion and am blessed with many relatives. So I'll pass it on to Toshka Jordan.
My Tlingit name is Stanley People in North Carolina, and I am a technical assistant specialist. Back to Teresa.
If I can get the mute button to work. So I am here to introduce one of our esteemed relatives here. We have a grandparent, Eileen, our Iron Cloud, two dogs, excuse me. And she is esteemed Porcupine resident in the heart of Oglala Lakota Sioux Nation on the Pine Ridge Reservation of South Dakota, where she has lived for 74 years and is an enrolled member of the Oglala Sioux tribe. She and her husband, Paul Robertson, are parents of three children and many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Iron Cloud has shown a lifetime of service to her people, and she wrote numerous successful grants, brought funds to address children's issues and other social needs in the underserved population. Eileen has co-hosted a weekly show, Stand for Children, at the KILI radio of Porcupine, South Dakota for 7 years, which has covered a broad range of children and family issues. In her younger years, Eileen was a foster parent of adopted parents, and remains a caregiver today. And again, just wanting to welcome our esteemed elder here, Eileen.
Toja and Teresa, just a correction on the name. Her name is Eileen Ironcloud, not Eileen Ironcloud Two Dogs.
Thank you. I'm so used to saying Eileen Cloud Two Dogs. Thank you for correcting that.
Toshka Jordan.
It's my pleasure to introduce Nohealani. She is a Native Hawaiian woman and a new mom. Baby is 11 months. So we're so excited to have her perspective here today. She started a small business called Mindful Keiki, and it seeks to equip the youth of Hawaii with social and emotional life skills. She has her bachelor's degree in psychology from San Diego State, and she's looking on growing her business and, taking care of her family in Hawaii. She's also a Kamehameha graduate. So any and all questions, Hawaii, please send her way.
Thank you, Toshka. The next slide, please. So what are we doing today? This is a summary. So we are providing this information. We know that parents and grandparents are critical to our children and our grandchildren, and that we know that their connection to them, their relationship with them, is very critical and key to preventing youth being involved in the juvenile justice system. And so we're going to talk about that today, and we're going to hear from them about their um, culturally based, tribally based strategies to prevent youth being involved in the justice system. So that's why we're here today. We're so glad that we can share this information with you. So I'll turn it over to Toshka, Jordan.
Hi, so here are our learning objectives today, but I just kind of want to summarize it. We are here to increase our knowledge, on parenting programs, and we're here to provide resources for you guys. We're here to, share some perspectives from a grandparent and from a new parent point of view. And also, we are here to just talk about family engagement and strategies that will help, our families and the families that you work with.
Thank you, Toshka. So in looking at the research, there's always research out there, but a lot of times there's some research that we look for that is not there. So, for example, Indigenous research, there isn't a whole lot of information about a Native parent involvement, Native grandparent involvement. But what we could find, we know that including extended family and relatives in youth justice programming really promotes kinship and builds support for youth. That is based on research. So those of you that are developing programs, then think about that. It's not just the mother and father or the parent guardian, the legal guardian. What about the grandparents? What about the aunties and uncles, the cousins, and including them in your programming or the development of your program? So think about that. We know from the research there's a strong link between parent involvement and delinquency among youth. And we know that that's really something that we have to address in terms of, well, what we know that there's a strong link, but how do we address it? So, for example, there could be negative parent involvement, and that may lead to the youth being more involved in the justice system. Or there could be a positive involvement, which then would lessen the risk of the youth being involved in the justice system. So think about that in terms of the research. We know from the research that monitoring by parents and caregivers protects against juvenile recidivism, becoming further involved in the justice system. So the greater the monitoring, higher the monitoring by parents and caregivers would, it seems from the research, leads to, actually protects against the youth being more involved in the justice system. So like say if they're involved initially and then they wouldn't progress to being more involved, the greater the monitoring. We also know from the research that youth arrest has shown to have significant negative impact on the transition to adulthood and socioeconomic. So what does that mean? It means that if a youth has been arrested, then that will have an impact on their employability, on their education, and it's just really I guess a strong link that we have to take a look at and we have to guard against. We know that from the research that juvenile delinquency, youth that are involved in the justice system, is related to, and I quote from this article, criminalization of traumatic responses. What does that mean? It means that we don't really look at the roots of the behavior. We don't look at the roots of how did they become involved in the youth justice system? Do we do trauma screening? Do we do grief screening? We know that a lot of youth that are involved in the justice system have had experiences of trauma and exposures to trauma and have had significant losses, which are connected to their involvement in the justice system. So those are what we found. And I know that there's a lot more out there, but we were really looking for Native, Indigenous involvement, research that was related to that. So Toja, Teresa, or Toshka, Jordan, do you have any comments or anything to add here?
Yeah, I do, Tui. Thank you. I would say, some of the work that I've done outside of the Tribal Youth Resource Center with the parents involved in the women's incarceration facility here in our state is, kind of that correlation between parents and children and caregivers, and being able to keep the youth connected with their parents, right? Some of the programs that they have involved, years past, they, used to be able to bring youth into the facility to stay for the weekend. Now it's more or less just being able to connect the youth and their families to the visitation of the parents. But the strong importance of keeping youth involved with that connection with their parents significantly decreases the involvement of youth delinquency later on in life. I've seen kind of some of the statistics that show what it looks like when youth do not have involvement with their parents versus, the opposite of having their parents involved. And some of the programs that are involved in being able to take some of our relatives, in our state, in Minnesota, we have our facility here in the central part of the Minnesota state. However, we have a lot of our tribal communities several hours away, right? So we are able to support some of the programs that will bring youth to be involved in visitation, in different programming that they have there at the facility. Same thing with fathers, right? It's important to keep fathers involved with the connection of their youth, their children, who, may be being taken care of by grandparents or aunties and uncles. Having them connected and bringing them to visitation increasingly decreases the involvement of their maybe involvement in later on that kind of that pipeline that we talk about of youth being involved in the kind of that pipeline to incarceration. So our stronghold is being able to decrease what those numbers look like, and so being able to support our youth who are the children of incarcerated parents is really significant in decreasing the delinquency of that criminalization and the traumatic responses that we have with that. I'll turn it back to you, Tui, Ethleen.
That's really interesting, Toja. So what you're saying is that like say if they're the youth that we're working with in these tribal youth programs or these youth healing to wellness court programs or any other youth programs, if they identify a child or youth that has a parent in prison, and if they promote connection, like making sure that they have transportation and to so that they can visit their parent, that actually reduces involvement in the justice system. That's really interesting.
It does, and it also increases or it decreases some of that traumatic experience, right, of being detached from their parent. The involvement, whether it be in the courts, with child protection, within tribal youth programs, just having that connection with their parent significantly decreases the involvement that they may have later on in life in whether it be the youth delinquency programs or adult delinquency programs. And so really being able to support what our youth have with their involvement with their parents in the immediate, I think it significantly decreases the chances of that what we talk about is the pipeline, right? That
Yes.
immediate
Yes.
movement on to incarceration. So whatever we can do to support our youth and as well as their parents, right? It's not just about the youth, it's about their parents as well.
So I would be interested in, and you all that are listening might be interested in too, how many of the youth in your community have a parent in prison? And do we have that information? I know that in our community, we don't, in my community of Porcupine, but I do know of individuals being in prison and that their children are in the community, but we're not making that connection. We're not going to them and, you know, trying to get them to, I guess, visit their parents, provide transportation. So think about that, you know. So where do we start? We start with identifying, right? Finding out the numbers, you know, how many of the youth in our community or that we're serving in our program in our schools, how many of them have a parent in prison? So that's something really, really interesting. Thank you for that. Toshka, Jordan, did you have anything to add?
I guess it's just from, you know, as a child of, you know, a former and incarcerated parent, who passed away. But, you know, I was just thinking about the role that um culture plays as well, because,
Mhm.
you know, you grow up with a little bit of shame when your parent is incarcerated. And sometimes it's hard to, you know, separate the shame between your parent being incarcerated and sometimes a little bit of shame in culture. And, you know, I know the great work that, you know, my sister Teresa does when she visits, and they really bring culture into those spaces.
Mhm.
And I think that, you know, that's an important part. And I'm, you know, looking forward to our grandparent and parent who, you know, both bring culture into their roles.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that would really have been beneficial for me, and I think it's beneficial for our youth. And also, Mike Michaeli Horn, sorry if I got your name wrong, was looking for the full citations of the articles listed. We can send that to you after our webinar today. Thank you.
Yes, and it is on the references page at the end of this presentation. And like Toshka said, we will share the slides with you. But thank you for mentioning that about culture, because we know from the research that culture is a very strong protective factor for youth and families. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So Toja, Teresa, did you want to segue into introducing our grandparent again,
Yes,
our relative?
absolutely. So again, I'd like to honorably introduce our grandparent who is going to share some of her perspectives on the prevention of youth and delinquency. And Eileen Ironcloud, if you would like to join us in the conversation and sharing what you have.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to say good afternoon to all of you today, and I'm honored to be here to share my perspective on this very, very important issue. Before I get into that, though, I want to share something that's really important in understanding in working with families, and that is knowing where the families are coming from. And in my case, I have a a very, when I look back on my life experiences, very varied and interesting experiences. When, first of all, I have 4 brothers, 4 sisters, and 1 sister passed away. We were raised with our parents. We were very, very fortunate to have both my mom and my dad in the house and providing really important teachings to us. And when I was a little girl, we lived way out in the country, way out in the country. And I went to a school. It was a Catholic boarding school right in Porcupine, our home district. And the reason why we were in the boarding school was because we lived so far out that they couldn't bring us every day. And that time in my life was very, very difficult because there was a lot of abuse by the Catholic nuns in the school system there. And so from there, my dad and my mom took us to Cleveland, Ohio, and on this BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs relocation program, where they were to offer a job opportunity and assimilation also to Native peoples. And so we were there for 3 years. Then I came back, our family moved home, and then I and my sisters went to a government boarding school, but that was in no way, like the Catholic boarding school. And so with all of these things, with these experiences, I've learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes, and had to go through a healing journey. And so when it comes to, as we say, culture, indigenous knowledge, however you want to frame it, then it's very important for people to know that we've all come on journeys. What is in our journey? What is in our life experience? And working with families before, then we would have a talking circle, and there were a lot of grandparents, mainly grandmothers, we call them unchis in our language, that were caretakers of the grandchildren. And they really were, they wanted to talk. They wanted to visit about their experiences. They wanted to know things. They wanted to learn things. And I remembered that, of doing that. And then when it came my turn to become a adoptive mother and a grandson that who is still with me today, that as a grandmother, there were a lot of things that I didn't know. There was, especially when COVID came, and people, the students had to stay out of school, and we had to learn these new ways to learn on the computer. And I talked to other grandparents, and they just had such a hard time. And some of the parents, their children just dropped out because they didn't know those things. So there was a lot more support that's needed. And as far as working with the justice system, how are we going to support? What strategies do we have to support those, our grandchildren, our nephews, nieces who are in the justice system? And it starts again with education and information. It's something that we have to learn as caretakers. What happens in the court system? Are they going to take them away? And this is what I hear from my younger sister, who's a tribal advocate in the court system. And she said that the grandparents have a really hard time because they don't understand the systems and the laws. And so first, we had this conversation many times, her and I, about how much information is needed for the parents and the grandparents if we want to help them effectively, help our children and grandchildren effectively. So it comes, from knowing what our what knowledge we have, the indigenous and the academic, or just the ways of the Western world, the court systems, for example. And I want to bring my something in here, a personal thing that my father used to say, and he would say in our language, "Wocheke na wotakuye echela." It's only prayer and relatives. And he would talk about how important that is, and that was our support. So many of our people who do not have that support, some who were raised totally in boarding schools, don't have the parenting skills or have learned a different style of parenting, then there has to be that unlearning. One of my uncles who went away to school to get his PhD came back and said, we have to unlearn, we have to teach, unlearn what we learned in school so our children can have a future, good future. And that's true. And so learning and maneuvering the systems is really key. And so that's one of the supports that I think grandparents, aunties, uncles need. And then there comes a language barrier also, because of many people my age, Lakota is their first language. And so how do you explain all of this? And so I just think it's very important. It's so important as a foundation of to be really effective and to help our children, but then to also support them in the juvenile justice system, is that knowing who we are, knowing our identity, and knowing our values. One really important one, another sister who worked in the child welfare system for many years told me yesterday, she said, in our work, whenever she worked in child support, children and families, and she said that when people would have a case or they would have a worker go out, she said, one thing that they learned and was that there's a value called wokigna, and that's to offer comfort. And you have to begin with that, to offer comfort. And sometimes even in our systems, our workers are so overwhelmed and they also need comfort too. And so this goes a long way, offering comfort, and rather than getting so frustrated. And I know we get frustrated as parents and grandparents, but to teach our, in my case, my grandson, patience, and for him to learn how to offer comfort also. And so I know that there are programs on our reservation, and there are some tribal programs, but I don't know of any, programs that really, outside of CPS, that really work with the court system or the juvenile system. And there are some programs within the schools, but they are for the school, the students. And so we also have around our reservation, we have the circles of people who practice or live the Lakota lifeways, and they help each other and support each other. And so that's on an informal basis. So as far as really supporting our people, our relatives in the justice system, then it comes down to who we are as people. If we've had healing, and that's a big one also, that as I mentioned earlier, that I'm on a constant healing journey also, and so we have to recognize that in our work too, that this is what happens. So I wanted to share that with you all. It's basic, actually, when you think about it. The family, the community, the healing, getting educated or asking for information, and that's how we help each other. So I just wanted to share that with you all today.
For input. And are there any questions from the audience for our relative and her grandparent perspective? And while people might be thinking about it or putting something in the chat, then I did want to acknowledge, how what you talked about as far as like the roots, the roots of the parents of the youth who are involved in the juvenile justice system. What have they been through? And also the grandparents, what have they been through that was a factor in the youth being involved in the justice system? And not only on the negative side, like trauma and grief, but also on the positive side, like the blessings you talked about, our father and how he really emphasized kinship and emphasized prayer. And so that was a strength, that was a blessing, that was given to us as his children to lean on that, during difficult times. So thank you for giving us your perspective. And are there any questions from our relatives in the audience? Well, we will have a time for questions and discussion later on also. So if you think of anything, then just put it in the chat and then we can come back to it. But thank you, sister, for your time on this. And we will now turn it over to Toshka Jordan to introduce our parent relative.
Thank you. That was powerful. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed listening. And now we're going to shift to, the other side of caregiving, which is, a parent and a new parent at that, with Nohealani, who is based out of Oahu and is here to talk about, her perspectives, her parenting strategies, and just all things. So I'm excited to introduce Nohealani again. Thank you.
Aloha kako, everybody. O Nohealani ko uinoa no Oahu, Hawaii, Mayau. My name is Nohealani. I'm from Oahu, Hawaii. And I just want to take a moment to appreciate everyone's perspectives on trying to heal and connect, because I think that's what it's about, being here in this world. And I want to share a little bit about my background with you before I continue talking about my perspective. I went to Kamehameha schools from kindergarten. My family did practice Hawaiian values, but it wasn't explicit. They weren't deeply connected to the culture. We didn't do a lot of traditional Hawaiian practices. So I really got that perspective from my school. And that's when I began to integrate my Hawaiian identity, and feel more connected to my Hawaiian ancestors and that side of me. Later, I went to graduate from San Diego State. I came home and taught first grade for a year. And then I saw the need in the keiki for learning about their emotions and learning to stop and breathe. And I did a little experiment with my kids doing meditation. And I was able to get 20 kindergartners to sit silently for 2 minutes. And I opened my eyes and I was like, wow, this is something. So I started a small business called Mindful Keiki, where I help children of Hawaii to regulate their emotions and give them the tools to navigate their lives to productive and fulfilling lives. So that's just a little bit about me. Like I said, growing up in my family, we didn't practice a lot of Hawaiian values explicitly, but we did still put Ohana first. Yeah, we put the family first. We were very loyal. We always showed up to things, kiss grandma hi and make sure she's all okay, help her with anything she needs, that kind of thing. And ho'ihi, respect of self, respecting our elders. Those were all very big, for sure. But when I had my own child recently, I knew that I wanted to incorporate this Hawaiian perspective a lot more. With Kuleana being kind of the center, as a responsibility to ourselves, our responsibility to our family, our responsibility to our culture, which Eileen Ironcloud did touch on that, and Jordan as well. Just about really digging into your culture and learning about it and trying to perpetuate it. Currently, I'm trying to learn Olelo Hawaii. My first language is English, but Olelo Hawaii has had a long history of being suppressed. In 1896, it was actually banned in schools, so you weren't able to speak Hawaiian. And that has had a trickle down effect, right? So my family didn't grow up speaking Hawaiian at all. In fact, I had the option of taking Hawaiian language in school, and my mom urged me, no, don't take that, take Spanish. That's way more useful in the world. And now I look back at it and I'm like, wow, I that's my culture, that's my tradition, I need to know that. It's at the heart of our culture. Language is so important. So I've been trying to incorporate that, and I've been taking classes now so that my child can learn Hawaiian culture and my child can be able to olelo Hawaii, and we can communicate together that way. So I've also been trying to incorporate a lot of Hawaiian values into raising her. I mean, there's only so much you can do right now. She's 11 months old, so still brand new. But what I've learned through my business and what I've learned through life is that children learn more from watching you than from what you tell them and what you teach them. So I've been trying to incorporate these values into my life, and just how I live. Ho'oponopono being a really big one, which is conflict resolution, reconciliation, asking for forgiveness. It's basically acknowledging that we're all flawed and we need to apologize and repair and recognize that we make mistakes, and that's okay, but you need to come back and fix those mistakes. So what that looks like in my life now is like, she's watching everything, right? She's crawling around and she's always soaking in anything we say, anything we do. She wants to be a part of it. So when me and my husband, if we ever have an argument and she's sitting right there watching us, and I know she can feel the tension in the room, I know she's listening to the words we're speaking to each other. And sometimes they're not the kindest words, but we are human and we're working on it. But after that, I always try to sit down and talk with her, and I'm like, I don't know how much she can understand, but I know she gets some, and I just tell her it has nothing to do with you. We love each other. We're just trying to figure it out. We're trying our best. And then also when I repair with him from our argument, I have her watch that as well. Because I think it's important for her to see that we also need to reconnect and we need to make things right together so that our whole family can move forward. It's not as much of an unspoken thing. It's more, this is what's happening and it's okay. We made a mistake, but we're trying to fix it. We're trying to work on it. We're trying to heal. Because like Eileen Ironcloud was saying, it is a healing journey for all of us. whether we are consciously working on it or not, that's what it's about. And whether we recognize that our parents were messed up and their parents were messed up through generations of trauma, we need to take those steps. It's our kuleana to ourselves and our kuleana to our offspring to look at ourselves and try to improve, right? And that's also what my business is about, Mindful Keiki, just recognizing how we can better ourselves and what's going on in our heads and what thoughts are we having, what emotions are we feeling, and how are we impacting those around us. With that too, there's a kuleana to the Aina, the land, to our ancestors. So in Hawaiian values, Aina was so important. There's a saying, malama ka Aina, malama ka Aina ya'oi, which means if you take care of the land will take care of you. Which is completely accurate. And I try to incorporate this every day with Hili Na'i is her name, my child. We go outside, we pick up trash, we take care of plants, we have a little garden going. And it's so true. If you are connected to the Aina, it really will take care of you. It will give you food, it will help you mentally. So any chance I get, we try to do something outside, something for the Aina, because that's the center of life. That's what we're here to do, right? Live with the land. Let's see, also ho'ihi, respect. That's a really big one. Respecting ourselves and respecting her as a child. A lot of people sometimes look down on children or treat them differently like you would yourself or another person, when really they need and deserve the respect that you treat anybody else. And I think that children can feel that when people look down on them. So that's a big one that we tried to do together, is respect her and definitely make sure that we're treating her like we would anyone else. The cultural education is a big part of it too, and just trying to teach her where she came from, teach her about her heritage, teach her about my grandparents and their grandparents who were more culturally connected and where they came from, and keeping the ohana as the center is very important as well. Yeah, just surrounding all of our thoughts, always showing up for each other. I think that is what it's all about, connecting, like how we're speaking about connecting to culture, connecting to family, and connecting to ourselves and the land. Because that's what we're here for, right? On this planet is human connection, and all those things are what is going to make us whole. So yeah, that's basically my spiel on parenting and Hawaiian values. And thank you all for having me.
Thank you so much, Nohealani. I really appreciate your reference to the land. And I had talked with somebody about, the rights of the land. We call in our culture the land, we call the earth Unchimaka, Grandmother Earth. And we look at, like the plants and the birds and everything in nature as relatives, as having a spirit, and they all have rights, just like humans have rights. So I really appreciate your emphasis on the connection to the land, because the land has a spirit and can help us. But we also have a responsibility, right, as human relatives, to take care of the land. So that is so wonderful. I really appreciate your perspective. Is there any questions for a relative from Hawaii? Or any comments? But like I said, we will have time for questions, discussion, if anything comes up for you all. So thank you so much. And we'll go to Teresa.
Oh, thank you so much, Nohealani. That was really beautiful. I was caught up in the moment, so I just wanted to say thank you for that. And kind of transitioning over to the core Indigenous parenting strategies, we have a wide variety of resources that will support some of the information that we provide today. But in respect to the child's anatomy, when we talk about the perspective of parents and caregivers working with children, we have some of the resources here today. I won't go through in each and every one of them. I apologize. I'm dealing with some voice issues today, so bear with me. But with respect to the child's anatomy, we look at the children are seen as spiritual beings, obviously in our perspective communities, and as well as working with adults that as act as guides, and not controllers. And when we talk about adults being acts of guides, we're not talking about necessarily just parents, right? We're talking about caregivers, kinship providers. We're talking about foster providers, all of the above. So working with folks that provide that discipline, and often a non-punitive way. We would like that to be something that we really encourage, is that non-punitive way of working with our youth, as well as learning about our intergenerational learning, about elders playing a key role in teaching language, values, and skill sets for the duration of their life. Learning oral language, and ceremonies, stories, and teaching about the land. Community-based parenting. It's not about just being a parent, right? I myself had really needed at a time in my life to rely on community support. I had to rely on those around me that would be, that would step up to help me care for my child. Not everybody has a whole village to help partake in that. But if you do, obviously we have the aunties and uncles and grandparents who are involved in that. And then, of course, most importantly, our spiritual and cultural connections, learning about the language, ceremony, and traditional knowledges, um, you know, paying special attention to the identity and pride and connection, teaching our youth what are their clan, what are their colors, what are their connections to Uchimika, as Tui Ethleen would say, right, to the land. And of course, the land-based education, really connecting with the schools, the providers of the schools, and the survivor skills that they are willing to teach, right? Our programs, our tribal youth programs, are really, really strong in being able to provide that cultural perspective and the connection to Mother Earth, Father Sky, and the traditional teachings that go along with that. There may be sovereign traditional teachings about the food gathering and environmental stewardship, and the natural and often seen classroom of the healer, whether it be the teacher, the provider of the program, and the staff that go along with that. So really relying on kind of the whole community as a whole to partake in raising a child. It's not one individual practice. It takes a village. And I know that's a cliche to say, but it really, really does make a difference. And in my own personal experience, knowing that there was one child or one adult, excuse me, that was willing to really share in the knowledge of raising my young, and saying it's okay if the parent isn't always the most strongest to teach those teachings. We have others in the community that will help and partake in that, and having that support and the love and the guidance from aunties, uncles, and grandparents that are in our communities. And with that, I will pass to the next slide. Is that my slide? Okay, so again, having that Strong Hearts and Native Helpline, we do encourage our communities and our programs to really rely on the resources that we provide. Some of the resources that we serve. I'm sorry, I'm dealing with COVID, so please bear with me. The Strong Hearts of the Native Helpline, and in the emotional support that Native families have. And I will turn it over to my brother Jordan.
Native Wellness Institute, it promotes well-being of being Indigenous people. You know, they have tribal trainings that, you know, you can contact with them and they'll come to you and provide, you know, their specific trainings, and that, you know, they deal with youth and community and reconciliation. And then there's I Don't Know More education resources, and that offers, you know, materials for families and parents, you know, on tribal knowledge, you know. So those are some additional resources for us today.
We realize that we are almost at time, and I apologize for any background noise. I think they're fixing something right outside. Maintenance just chose to fix something right while we're on this on this online learning event. So I apologize. If there are any questions or discussion items, you could put them in the chat. Otherwise, email us and we can certainly respond. You will get a copy of the slides. So with that, I'm going to go to the next slide. So these are our references. I won't go through them in the interest of time, but somebody had asked, one of the relatives had asked for the full reference, and here they are. And like I said, you will get a copy of the slides, so you'll be able to look these up and dig into it some more. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andy.
Thank you, Ethleen. Really quickly, we'll go ahead and launch our evaluation poll. And if you would just stay on briefly after we complete the evaluation, we'll give everyone about a minute, and then Jordan's going to close us in a good way. And once we close in a good way, we will end the webinar. Thank you all for joining us today. All right. I'm going to go ahead and end our poll so I can move a little bit forward. Thank you all again for joining us and for your feedback. I'm going to pass it over to Jordan to close us in a good way. Shortly
Sorry.
after. No, you're just fine. I wanted to share our contact page as well before I pass all the way to Jordan. You're just fine. Again, here is our contact information, our location, our phone numbers, and our website, should you want to reach out for any further information or future OLAs. Jordan, up to you.
Sorry, that's all one of my relatives. Their idea. Yeah, I just wanted to, quickly close us out with just being so, happy to be here with everyone today because I know we're talking about cliches, but it does take a village, and to hear the different perspectives of grandparents and of parents and a young parent just starting out, it just kind of made me think of all of us on this journey as caregivers, whether we're parents, aunties, uncles, and the role we play healing our past traumas and using our cultures to promote really healthy, kids for the future who know who they are. And I'm just so grateful that we're here today and able to do this work. So thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you everyone for joining us. Have a wonderful day.